For 20 years, humans did not speak to the galaxy. Not one word. Not one signal. Not one ship crossed beyond the edge of their own solar system. The aliens called it fear. They were wrong. They were about to learn why. Space was cold, dark, and endless. Somewhere at the edge of a quiet solar system, a small alien scout ship floated silently between the stars. Its metal body was scratched and old, covered with the marks of 100 battles. Inside, red lights blinked softly across a curved control panel. A tall alien creature sat in the pilot's seat. His name was Vren. He had gray skin, sharp eyes, and long fingers that moved fast across the buttons in front of him. He was young, but he had already fought in 3 wars. His race called themselves the Kaldor. Other species in the galaxy had a different name for them. They called them Deathworlders. The Kaldor came from a planet where everything wanted to kill you. The air was thin. The gravity was heavy. The animals were fast and deadly. To survive there, a person had to be strong, alert, and ready to fight every single day. Because of this, the Kaldor grew into powerful warriors. Their bodies were tough. Their minds were sharp. Their weapons were feared across 100 star systems. But right now, Vren was not thinking about war. He was thinking about something strange. He was staring at a small blue and green planet on his screen. A quiet planet. A planet that should not exist anymore. At least not the way it did. "Still nothing?" a voice asked behind him. Vren turned his head. Another Kaldor walked into the small control room. His name was Doran, an older soldier with a scar across his left eye. Doran had seen more of the galaxy than most, but even he looked confused as he stared at the same screen. "Nothing," Vren said. "No signals, no messages, no ships, nothing for 20 years. Doran crossed his arms. "That's not possible. No species goes silent for 20 years. Not even the weak ones." "Well," Vren said quietly, "this one did." The planet on the screen was called Earth. 20 years ago, Earth had been a loud, busy planet. Humans had sent messages into space. They had built space stations. They had even sent a few small ships beyond their own solar system, clumsy and slow but full of hope. Other species had watched them with curiosity. Some laughed at how weak and soft humans looked. Their bodies were fragile. Their technology was behind almost every other race in the galaxy. They did not even have proper warships. Many species believed humans would either die out on their own or become slaves to a stronger race. It was only a matter of time. But then one day, without warning, Earth went silent. No explanation, no message, no goodbye. The messages stopped. The signals stopped. Every human ship near the edge of their system turned around and came home. And after that, nothing left Earth's solar system again. Not a single ship. Not a single word. For a while, other species were curious. Some thought a war had destroyed them. Some thought a disease had wiped them out. A few brave scouts flew close to check. None of them ever explained what they found. They simply never spoke of Earth again. And slowly, over the years, most species stopped caring. Humans became a forgotten story, a weak, quiet species that had probably destroyed itself or hidden itself away out of fear. That was the story most of the galaxy believed. Vren was not so sure. "Command wants a decision," Doran said, sitting down at the second control seat. "Do we report this as empty or as active?" Vren didn't answer right away. He kept staring at the planet. There was something about the silence that bothered him. It wasn't the silence of a dead world. Dead worlds had a certain feeling to them, a stillness, a coldness that sensors could pick up easily. Destroyed planets gave off strange radiation. Empty planets had no movement at all. But Earth was not dead. Vren could see faint lights on the night side of the planet. Cities were still glowing softly. Weather patterns still moved across the oceans. Something was still living there, still breathing, still working. Humans were alive. They were just quiet. "They're not dead," Vren finally said. "They're still down there." Doran leaned forward, frowning. "Then why the silence? A living species always wants to be heard." Every species we've ever met wants to prove they exist, wants to be seen, wants to be respected. Except them. Maybe they're hiding, Vren said. Or maybe, Doran said slowly, they're just weak. Maybe they saw the galaxy and realized how far behind they are. Maybe they got scared and pulled back like a frightened animal into its den. Vren didn't respond. Something about that explanation didn't feel right to him. But he couldn't explain why. Far below, on the small scout ship's monitor, one single old signal repeated itself every few hours. It was faint, automatic, sent from a small floating device near the edge of the solar system. A buoy, simple and old, drifting quietly in the dark. The message was always the same, spoken in a calm human voice, translated into dozens of galactic languages. You are entering a protected system. This is your only warning. Turn back. Vren had heard the message many times already. Every scout ship that came near Earth heard it. Most species laughed at it. It sounded like the words of a weak, frightened race, trying to scare away visitors with empty threats. No fleet followed the warning. No weapons ever appeared. It was just words, spoken again and again into empty space. That message is a joke, Doran said, smiling. A bluff. If they had any real power, they would show it. Instead, they just talk. Maybe, Vren said again. But this time, his voice was quieter. He looked closer at the message's origin point. The buoy was old, but its technology puzzled him. It was small, simple-looking, almost primitive on the outside. But its power signature was strange, stronger than it should be for something so small. He filed the thought away and said nothing more about it. Far away, in a massive fleet gathering near the edge of Kaldor territory, thousands of warships floated together like a small metal galaxy of their own. Bright engines glowed orange and blue across the darkness of space. Soldiers moved through hallways lined with weapons. War drums, both literal and symbolic, echoed through every ship. In the largest ship, a war cruiser named Skytorn, stood a Kaldor commander named Kraith. Kraith was massive, even by Kaldor standards. His shoulders were wide. His voice was deep and heavy, like distant thunder. He had led fleets into battle for over 30 years, and he had never lost a war. Every planet he had ever attacked had either surrendered or been destroyed. Kraith stood in front of a large glowing map of the galaxy, staring at one small blue and green dot near the edge of known space. Earth. Around him stood other Kaldor leaders, generals and advisors, all watching him carefully. "Commander," one of them said, a female general named Sira. "Our scouts confirm it. 20 years of silence. No fleet. No weapons detected. No allies responding on their behalf. This is the weakest target we have found in a decade." Kraith said nothing. He simply stared at the small dot. "They call themselves human," another advisor added. "Soft bodies, slow minds, primitive technology." Before their silence, our scans showed nothing impressive. No warships, no advanced weapons, just small satellites and simple communication towers. "And why?" Kraith asked slowly. "Did they go silent?" The room went quiet for a moment. "Fear," Sira answered confidently. "It is the only explanation. They looked into the wider galaxy, saw true power, real warriors, real empires, and they were afraid. So they hid, like small animals burying themselves in the ground when a larger predator walks by." Kraith's eyes narrowed slightly. Something about that answer didn't sit right with him. He had fought many wars. He had studied many species. In his long experience, true fear was loud. Frightened species screamed for help. They begged other empires for protection. They built weak alliances out of desperation. They sent messages in every direction, hoping someone would save them. Humans had done none of that. They had simply gone quiet. And silence, especially total, complete silence, was something Kraith had never truly seen before. Not from fear. From fear, yes, small sounds still escaped. Silence like this felt different. It felt controlled. But the evidence in front of him was clear. No fleet, no weapons, no allies. 20 years without a single warlike action. Krath had seen weak species before, and this matched every pattern he knew. He pushed his doubts aside. "Prepare the fleet," Krath finally said, his voice echoing through the room. "We move on Earth." The war room erupted into motion. Officers rushed to their stations, screens filled with battle plans. Soldiers checked their weapons one final time. After years of watching and waiting, the Kaldor fleet was finally ready to move. Sira stepped closer to Krath as the room buzzed with activity. "You hesitate," she said quietly, watching his face. "I do not hesitate," Krath said. "I am cautious. There is a difference." "They are weak, Commander. 20 years of silence is not caution. It is surrender before the battle has even begun." Krath looked at her for a long moment. "Perhaps," he said. "But I have learned one lesson in 30 years of war, Sira. The loudest enemy is rarely the most dangerous one." Sira frowned but said nothing more. She trusted her commander's experience even if she did not fully understand his words. Krath turned back to the glowing map, staring once more at that small blue and green dot. 20 years of silence, he whispered to himself. "What have you been doing down there?" Meanwhile, far from the alien fleet, deep inside Earth's solar system, something massive floated quietly near the far side of the moon, hidden in shadow, powered down, waiting. It had been waiting for a very long time. Back on the small Kaldor scout ship, Vren continued watching Earth from a safe distance. Doran had fallen asleep in his chair, tired after a long shift. The ship was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines and the gentle beeping of sensors. Vren couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the planet. Something about it bothered him deeply. He thought about the calm, steady voice in that warning message. He thought about the strange power signature hidden inside that small buoy. He thought about how the cities below still glowed with light, how the ocean still moved with life, how nothing about this planet felt broken or dead or afraid. 20 years was a long time to stay silent. Long enough to hide something. Long enough to build something. Long enough to prepare. Vren's fingers moved slowly across the control panel, opening a new scan, a deeper one, aimed not at the planet's surface, but at the empty space surrounding it, especially near the far side of the moon. For a brief moment, just a flicker, his sensors picked up something unusual, a shape, large, hidden in shadow. Then, just as quickly, it vanished from his screen, as if it had never been there at all. Vren blinked, staring at the empty screen. He ran the scan again. Nothing. He told himself it was a sensor error, a glitch. Space was full of strange readings, especially near large planets and moons. But deep inside, a small, cold feeling settled into his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite explain, a feeling that told him something important. They were not looking at a weak, hiding species. They were looking at something waiting. Hours later, a message arrived on Vren's ship. Simple, direct, final. Fleet mobilization confirmed. All scout ships return to formation. Attack on Earth begins in 48 hours. Vren stared at the message for a long moment. He glanced one final time at the quiet, glowing planet on his screen. The calm oceans, the soft city lights, the strange, powerful little warning buoy still repeating its message into the empty darkness of space. "You are entering a protected system. This is your only warning. Turn back." For the first time since arriving here, Vren felt something he rarely felt. Not excitement for battle, not confidence in victory, fear. He turned his ship around and joined the fleet. 48 hours later, thousands of Kaldor warships crossed into Earth's solar system, engines glowing bright against the black of space, weapons armed, soldiers ready, commanders confident. They believed they were about to crush a weak, frightened, silent species. They had no idea what was really waiting for them. 48 hours after the order was given, the Kaldor fleet crossed into Earth's solar system. Thousands of warships moved together in the darkness, their engines glowing orange and blue, cutting through empty space like a river of fire. It was the largest fleet the Kyle Dor had sent anywhere in 10 years. Commander Kraith stood on the bridge of his war cruiser, the Skytorn, watching the stars slide past the window. Around him, officers moved between control stations, checking weapons, checking shields, checking scanners. The ship hummed with quiet, controlled energy, the sound of a machine built for war. Sira stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the main screen. "We are 3 hours from Earth's orbit," she said. "No resistance detected, no ships, no defense stations, nothing." Krath said nothing. He kept staring at the screen, watching the small blue and green planet grow slowly larger as the fleet moved closer. "You still look worried, Commander," Sira said. "I am not worried," Krath replied. "I am careful. There is a difference, yes, you have said this before." Sira allowed herself a small smile. "But look at the scans. Old satellites, weak signals, no shields, no defense grid. This is not a fortress, Commander. This is an open door." Krath turned his head slightly, studying the numbers on the screen. Sira was right, at least on the surface. Every scan showed the same thing. Earth looked exactly like a planet that had given up on defending itself. Old technology. No modern ships, no weapon stations. It was almost sad to look at, like a small animal that had stopped running because it had no strength left to run anymore. And yet, Krath's mind kept returning to one detail, a detail that bothered him more than anything else. The lights. Every dead world he had ever seen, every planet destroyed by war or disease or disaster, always had a certain look to it. Dark, cold, lifeless. But Earth's cities were still glowing, calm and steady, exactly the way a living, functioning civilization would look. A weak, dying species did not build calm, steady lights. A weak, dying species panicked, and panic was never quiet. "Something feels wrong," Krath said quietly, almost to himself. Sira heard him but chose not to respond. She had learned over many years that arguing with Kraith's instincts rarely worked, but she also believed, deep down, that this time her commander was simply being too careful. 20 years without a single message, without a single ship, without a single act of defense. That was not the behavior of a dangerous enemy. That was the behavior of a broken one. As the fleet moved closer to Earth, one small automatic voice continued to repeat itself through open space. The same calm message it had sent for 20 years, played now for thousands of new listeners. "You are entering a protected system. This is your only warning. Turn back." Laughter spread quietly through parts of the fleet. Young soldiers listening on their private channels mocked the message. To them, it sounded like the desperate plea of a frightened child, repeating the same empty threat over and over, hoping someone would finally believe it. On the Skytorn, one young officer named Dessa turned toward Kraith with a small grin. "Should we reply to their little warning, Commander?" she asked. Kraith didn't answer right away. He was staring at the message's source, a small buoy floating quietly near the edge of the system. Unarmed, unprotected, alone. "No," he finally said. "Ignore it." Dessa nodded and turned back to her station, though she couldn't hide her amusement. To her and to most of the fleet, this small warning message was nothing more than proof of how weak humanity truly was. 2 hours later, the fleet crossed deeper into the solar system, passing quietly through the outer planets, massive rings of ice and rock drifting silently around them. Sira ordered a small scout ship, a fast, light vessel meant for quick reconnaissance, to move ahead of the main fleet and take a closer look at Earth itself. "Send Probe 7, she said. "Standard scan, nothing aggressive, just information." A small silver ship broke away from the fleet, engines glowing bright as it shot forward faster than the larger warships behind it. Within minutes, it had pulled far ahead, moving directly toward Earth's orbit. On the Skytorn's bridge, everyone watched the probe's progress on the main screen. A small blinking dot moved steadily closer to the blue and green planet. "Probe 7 approaching outer orbit," an officer announced. "All systems normal." Kraith watched closely, his jaw tight. "Probe 7 entering scanning range." The dot moved closer, closer, until it was just a short distance from Earth's outer atmosphere. Then, without warning, the dot disappeared. No explosion, no flash of light, no warning signal, no final message. One moment the probe existed on the screen, and the next moment, it simply did not. The bridge went silent. "Report," Krath said sharply. The officer at the sensor station typed quickly, his hand slightly shaking. Probe 7 is gone, sir. No debris, no energy signature, no transmission. It just stopped." "Malfunction?" Sierra asked, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Unlikely," the officer replied. "All systems were reading normal right up until the signal cut out. There was no warning, no damage report, nothing." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Krath stared at the empty space on the screen where the probe's dot had been just seconds earlier. "Send probe 8, Sierra said finally, trying to sound calm. "Same path. Confirm what happened." A second small silver ship launched from the fleet, following almost the exact same path as the first. Everyone on the bridge watched closely this time, eyes locked on the screen. The probe moved steadily closer to Earth. Closer, closer. Then, at almost the exact same point where the first probe had vanished, the second probe disappeared as well. No explosion. No signal. No warning. Just gone. This time, the silence on the bridge lasted much longer. Sierra's confident expression had faded completely. She stared at the screen, her mind searching for an explanation that made sense. "Perhaps," she started, then stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Perhaps what?" Krath asked, his voice low and steady. "Perhaps there is some kind of natural anomaly in that area of space," Sierra said, though even she didn't sound convinced by her own words. "Some kind of energy field we don't understand yet." Krath didn't respond right away. He studied the empty space on the screen carefully, thinking. A natural anomaly would show some kind of energy reading, some kind of disturbance in the surrounding space. But there had been nothing. No warning, no buildup, no trace. Two advanced probes, each equipped with strong shields and multiple sensors, had simply ceased to exist in an instant. That was not how natural phenomena behaved. That was how a weapon behaved. A very precise, very powerful, very controlled weapon. "Recall the fleet's forward scouts," Krath ordered. "No more probes, no more scans. Full fleet holds position at the edge of the system." "Commander," one of the younger officers said, confused, "we are still far from any confirmed threat. Perhaps we should continue forward, gather more information." "I said hold position," Krath repeated, his voice sharper this time. The bridge fell silent, and the order was carried out immediately. Word of the disappearing probe spread quickly through the fleet. Whispers moved from ship to ship, soldier to soldier. Some dismissed it as a simple malfunction, bad luck, nothing more. Others, especially the older, more experienced soldiers, felt a familiar chill settle over them. The same feeling they remembered from other wars, other enemies who had proven far more dangerous than expected. On the Skytorn, Krath stood alone in his private quarters, staring at a small holographic map of Earth's solar system. The 2 points where his probes had disappeared blinked in red, both located near the far side of Earth's moon. He thought back to the old reports, the last real information anyone had gathered about Earth before its long silence. Weak technology, small ships, no advanced weapons. That had been the truth 20 years ago. But 20 years was a long time. 20 years was enough time to learn, to build, to prepare. 20 years was enough time for a young, struggling species to become something entirely different. Krath closed his eyes for a moment, remembering an old lesson from his early years of training, a lesson every young Kaldor warrior was taught before their first battle. The enemy who screams is rarely the enemy you should fear the most. Fear the enemy who stays silent. Fear the enemy who watches. Fear the enemy who waits. He had believed this lesson his entire life. He had seen it proven true in battle after battle. And yet, faced with Earth's strange, endless silence, he had allowed himself to believe even for a short time, that this species was simply weak. He would not make that mistake again. Back on the bridge, Sira approached Krath as he returned from his quarters, her expression serious now, all traces of her earlier confidence gone. "Commander," she said quietly, "the Council is asking for orders. Do we continue toward Earth or do we pull back and reassess?" Krath looked out at the massive fleet surrounding his ship, thousands of warships, filled with soldiers ready and eager for battle. Pulling back now, after gathering an entire fleet for this attack, would be seen as weakness, both by his own soldiers and by the wider Kaldor Empire. But moving forward blindly, without understanding what had destroyed two of his probes so easily, could be far more dangerous. "We continue," Krath finally said. "But carefully. Full combat readiness. All ships on high alert. No more scouts sent ahead alone." Sira nodded and quickly relayed the orders through the fleet. Slowly, cautiously, the massive Kaldor fleet began moving forward again, deeper into Earth's solar system, engines glowing bright against the darkness of space. As the fleet approached Earth's outer orbit, every scanner on every ship activated at once, searching desperately for any sign of danger, any sign of the mysterious force that had destroyed the two probes so easily. Nothing appeared. No weapons, no ships, no defense stations. Just empty, quiet space and the same calm little planet floating peacefully ahead of them. Slowly, the tension on the bridge began to ease slightly. Perhaps the probes had simply been unlucky, hitting some rare natural phenomenon. Perhaps Sira had been right after all. Perhaps Earth truly was as weak and defenseless as it appeared. Dessa, the young officer who had joked about the warning message earlier, allowed herself a small, relieved smile. "Scanners show nothing, Commander," she reported. "Earth's orbit is clear. No ships, no stations, no weapons." Krath studied the screen carefully, his sharp eyes searching every corner of the display. Everything looked calm. Everything looked exactly the way a helpless, silent planet should look. And that, more than anything else, was exactly what worried him. "Commander," another officer suddenly called out, his voice tight with tension, "we're picking up something near the far side of the moon. Large energy signature just appeared." Every head on the bridge turned toward the main screen. A massive shape had suddenly become visible near Earth's moon, a shape that had clearly been hidden until this exact moment, powered down, silent, waiting. Now it was glowing faintly, energy building steadily within it. "Identify it," Krath ordered sharply. The officer's fingers moved quickly across his controls, but after a few seconds he looked up, his face pale. "Commander, I can't. The scanners can't get a clear reading. It's too large, too advanced. I've never seen a design like this before." Sira stepped closer to the screen, her earlier confidence completely gone now, replaced with something far more uncertain. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Our scans showed nothing there just hours ago. Nothing." Krath stared at the glowing shape on the screen, his mind racing back to everything he had seen and heard since arriving in this system. The eerie silence, the calm, steady warning message, the two probes that had vanished without a trace. And now, this massive hidden shape, appearing exactly when the fleet was close enough to see it clearly. 20 years of silence, 20 years of preparation. Krath finally understood, with a cold, sinking feeling in his chest, exactly what kind of mistake his people had made. They had not been watching a weak, dying species hiding out of fear. They had been watching a patient, determined species preparing for exactly this moment. "All ships," Krath said, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. "Prepare for possible combat. Full alert. Immediately." Alarms began sounding across the fleet, red lights flashing through every ship's hallways as thousands of soldiers rushed to their battle stations. On the main screen, the massive hidden shape near the moon continued to glow brighter and brighter, its true size and power still hidden from the fleet's confused scanners. And deep inside that shape, something vast and powerful was finally waking up, after 20 long years of silent, careful waiting. 20 years earlier, deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a place far from any city, far from any ocean, far from any human eye, a small group of people sat in a quiet room and made a decision that would change everything. This is the story the Kaldor never knew. It began with a discovery. 20 years ago, a human research ship, small and simple, had drifted farther into deep space than any human vessel before it. The crew was not looking for trouble. They were only mapping distant stars, gathering data, doing quiet scientific work far from home. But out there, in the cold darkness beyond their solar system, they found something. Wreckage, massive broken pieces of a ship, far larger and far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. The wreckage was old, destroyed long before humans had even discovered it, but its scale was staggering. Whatever had built that ship had been powerful, and whatever had destroyed it had been even more powerful. The human crew recorded everything they could, gathered what samples they safely could, and returned home immediately. What they brought back changed the course of human history. In a quiet underground facility, deep beneath the mountains, human scientists, engineers, and military leaders gathered together to study what had been found. What they discovered terrified them. The wreckage was not from one civilization, it was from many. Pieces of different ships, different technologies, different species, all destroyed in the same region of space, all showing signs of the same kind of devastating weapon. The galaxy, it turned out, was not a peaceful place. It was a place of empires, wars, and powerful species who saw weaker civilizations not as neighbors, but as resources, or worse, as threats to be erased before they could grow strong enough to fight back. Humanity, still young, still developing, still fragile compared to the technology found in that wreckage, suddenly understood something important. If the wider galaxy discovered Earth too soon, humanity might not survive first contact. A meeting was called. Not a loud public meeting filled with press conferences and dramatic speeches, but a quiet, private one. World leaders, scientists, and military commanders gathered together, and for the first time in human history, they agreed on something almost unanimously. Humanity needed to go quiet, not because they were afraid to speak, not because they had nothing to say, but because speaking too soon, showing weakness too early, would invite exactly the kind of danger that had destroyed the ships in that wreckage. A woman named Dr. Elena Marsh, one of the lead scientists studying the wreckage, stood before the gathered leaders and said something that would later become one of the most repeated lines in human history, though at the time, only a small handful of people ever heard it. "We are not ready to be seen yet, so let us become something worth seeing before we let them look." The room agreed. From that day forward, Earth would send no more messages into deep space, no more probes beyond the solar system, no more signals announcing humanity's location and abilities. Instead, humanity would work, quietly, patiently, for as long as it took. The following 20 years were unlike anything in human history. With the wreckage as both a warning and a gift of new understanding, human scientists made breakthroughs faster than ever before. Technology that would have normally taken 100 years to develop was achieved in 20, driven by the terrifying knowledge of what waited beyond their small, quiet solar system. Every nation on Earth for once worked together. Old rivalries were set aside, not out of sudden kindness but out of necessity. If humanity was going to survive what was coming, division was a luxury they could no longer afford. Massive underground facilities were built, hidden from any satellite or scanner that might one day search for signs of human strength. Shipyards were constructed deep within mountains and beneath the ocean floor, far from prying eyes. New forms of energy were discovered and refined. New materials, stronger and lighter than anything before, were developed using knowledge gathered from the ancient wreckage. Slowly, carefully, in complete secrecy, humanity began building a fleet. Not a small fleet, not a fleet meant only for defense. A fleet meant to ensure that when the day finally came, when some outside power finally decided humanity was weak enough to attack, they would be met not with fear, but with overwhelming strength. Commander Sarah Reyes had been just a young engineer when the project began. Over 20 years she had risen through the ranks, working on nearly every major ship in humanity's new hidden fleet. Calm, focused, and endlessly patient, she had eventually been chosen to lead Earth's entire defense force. a position she had never sought but had accepted with quiet determination. Now, 20 years after that first quiet meeting, she stood in the command center of humanity's flagship, a massive vessel hidden deep within the shadow of the moon, watching a screen filled with hundreds of glowing red dots. The Kaldor fleet. "They've arrived," said a young officer beside her, his voice tense. Reyes nodded slowly, her expression calm despite the tension in the room around her. "Yes, right on schedule, more or less. Commander, their numbers are larger than we expected. Should we consider a defensive posture, hold back, let them make the first move?" Reyes turned to look at him, her eyes steady and calm. "We've been holding back for 20 years, she said quietly. "That time is over." Unlike the chaotic, tense energy filling the Kaldor fleet, the mood inside humanity's hidden command center was calm, almost eerily so. There was no shouting, no panic, no last-minute scrambling. Every officer moved with quiet precision, following procedures they had trained for countless times over the years. This was not a moment of fear for them. This was the moment they had spent 20 years preparing for. Reyes walked slowly through the command center, watching her officers work. She thought back to all the years of sacrifice that had led to this moment. Families who had given up ordinary lives to work in secret underground facilities. Scientists who had spent decades solving problems no one outside their small circles would ever know about. Soldiers who had trained relentlessly for a war they hoped would never come, but prepared for anyway. All of it, every quiet year, every silent sacrifice had led to this single moment. "Status of the fleet?" Reyes asked, stopping beside her chief engineer. "All ships fully powered, Commander. Shields at maximum, weapons ready. We are at full combat readiness." Reyes nodded, satisfied. She glanced at the main screen, watching the Kaldor fleet slowly approaching, their confusion clear even from a distance as their scanners struggled to understand what they were seeing. "They still don't know what they're looking at," the engineer said quietly, a small note of pride in his voice. "No," Reyes agreed. "They don't." 20 years of silence had never been about hiding. It had been about patience. While the wider galaxy assumed humanity was weak, frightened, or simply gone, humanity had used that assumption as a shield. No one paid close attention to a species believed to be dying quietly on its own. No one worried about threats from a planet everyone assumed had already given up. That misunderstanding had given humanity exactly what it needed most. Time. Reyes activated a small communication device on her wrist, opening a direct, one-way channel toward the approaching Kaldor fleet. It was time, finally, after 20 years of silence, for humanity to speak once more. Her voice was calm, steady, and clear as it traveled outward into the darkness of space, translated instantly into the Kaldor language, and broadcast toward Krath's flagship. "To the fleet approaching Earth," Reyes said, her tone calm but firm. "You have mistaken our silence for weakness. Silence was never weakness. Silence was patience." On the bridge of the Skytorn, the message reached Krath just as he stared at the massive, glowing shape near the moon, still trying desperately to understand its true size and power. The calm, steady human voice echoed through his ship's speakers, translated smoothly into his own language. "For 20 years you believed we were hiding out of fear," Reyes continued. "We were not hiding. We were preparing. You are not the first species to mistake our quiet for weakness, and we suspect you will not be the last. But today, you will understand the truth." Krath's hands tightened slowly at his sides as he listened. 20 years ago, we discovered that this galaxy is far more dangerous than we ever imagined," Reyes said. "We understood immediately that if we revealed our weakness too soon, we would not survive to grow strong. So we chose silence, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. We built, we trained, we prepared, quietly, patiently, for exactly this moment." Sierra, standing beside Krath, listened with a growing sense of dread creeping into her chest. "You came here today believing you would find a broken, defenseless world," Reyes's voice continued. "Instead, you have found a species that has spent 20 years becoming exactly what this galaxy fears most. A species that is patient enough to wait, and strong enough to finally stop waiting. The message ended. Silence filled the bridge of the Sky-Torn, broken only by the quiet hum of machines and the rapid, nervous breathing of the crew. Krath stared at the massive shape near the moon, still slowly powering up, its true size finally becoming clear on his scanners. It was not one ship. It was hundreds. An entire hidden fleet, built in complete secrecy, emerging now from 20 years of careful, silent preparation. "Commander," Sierra said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "Orders?" Krath's mind raced, replaying every warning sign he had noticed since arriving in this system. The strange, calm confidence of that small warning buoy, the disappearance of both probes without any trace, the eerie, unnatural stillness of a planet everyone believed to be dying. Every piece finally made sense. They had not stumbled upon a weak, dying species hiding out of fear. They had walked directly into a trap 20 years in the making. "All ships," Krath said, his voice steady despite the storm building inside him. "Prepare for immediate combat. This is no longer a simple attack. This is war." Alarms roared to life across the entire Kaldor fleet, thousands of ships scrambling into full combat formation, as the hidden human fleet finally revealed itself completely, emerging from the shadow of the moon like a wall of glowing steel. On the human flagship, Reyes watched calmly as her sensors confirmed the Kaldor fleet shifting into attack formation. "They're preparing to engage," her chief officer reported. Reyes nodded slowly, feeling neither fear nor excitement, only the calm, quiet confidence of 20 years of preparation finally reaching its conclusion. "Good," she said softly. "Let them come." She turned to face her crew, her voice carrying clearly through the command center. "Everyone, remember your training. Remember why we built all of this. We did not spend 20 years preparing to lose. All ships, take your positions. Today the galaxy learns the truth about humanity." Across the entire hidden fleet, thousands of human ships moved into formation, engines glowing steadily, weapon systems fully charged. 20 years of silent preparation finally ready to be tested. Between the two massive fleets, a tense, heavy silence hung in the empty space near Earth's moon, the calm before a storm that had been building for 2 full decades. Then, without warning, the first shots were fired. The first shots cut through the darkness like streaks of white fire. They came from the Kaldor fleet. Hundreds of ships firing at once, a wall of energy blasts racing toward the newly revealed human fleet. For 20 years, the Kaldor had never lost a battle. They did not intend to lose this one either, no matter how surprised they were. But something strange happened. The blasts, powerful enough to destroy lesser ships instantly, struck against the human fleet's shields and simply faded away, absorbed, scattered, gone. Not a single human ship suffered any real damage. On the Sky-Torn's bridge, Sierra stared at the screen in disbelief. Shields. Their shields absorbed a full volley without a scratch. That's not possible. Krath said nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes locked on the calm, steady formation of human ships ahead of them. They had not even attempted to dodge the attack. They had simply stood their ground and let the weapons fail against them. On the human flagship, Reyes watched the failed attack with the same calm expression she had held since the battle began. "Shields holding at 98%, her chief engineer reported. "Minimal energy loss." "Good," Reyes said. "Return fire. Target their forward escort ships first. Controlled response only. We are not here to destroy them completely." Across the human fleet, precise, calculated beams of energy shot outward, striking specific Kaldor ships with pinpoint accuracy. Unlike the chaotic, overwhelming attack the Kaldor had launched, the human response was focused and controlled, disabling engines, weapon systems, and shields rather than destroying entire ships outright. Within seconds, a dozen Kaldor escort ships went dark, drifting silently, powerless but intact. On the Sky-Torn, alarms blared as officers scrambled to understand what had just happened. "Commander, we've lost contact with 12 ships," an officer reported, his voice shaking. "They're not destroyed, sir, just disabled, completely powerless." Krath's hands tightened into fists at his sides. In 30 years of warfare, he had never seen an enemy fight with such precise, controlled restraint, especially not in the middle of their first real battle. This was not the desperate, chaotic defense of a frightened species. This was the calm, practiced skill of a fleet that had trained for this exact moment for 20 long years. "All ships, full attack," Krath ordered, his voice booming across the fleet's communication channels. "Do not hold back." Thousands of Kaldor warships surged forward, weapons blazing, engines roaring, soldiers shouting battle cries that echoed through metal hallways across the entire fleet. This was what the Kaldor knew best: raw power, overwhelming force, relentless aggression. The human fleet did not retreat. It did not panic. Instead, it moved with calm, coordinated precision, ships shifting into new formations smoothly, covering each other's weak points, adjusting instantly to every attack pattern the Kaldor threw at them. It was like watching two very different kinds of warriors fight. One side fought with fury and raw strength. The other side fought with patience, calculation, and quiet confidence. A large Kaldor battlecruiser broke away from the main formation, charging directly toward the human flagship. Weapons fully charged, engines pushed to maximum power. "Incoming cruiser, direct approach," an officer on the human flagship reported. Reyes watched the screen calmly. "Let it come closer. Full power to forward shields. Prepare a focused response." The Kaldor cruiser closed the distance rapidly, firing wave after wave of powerful energy blasts. Each attack struck the human flagship's shields, and each time, the shields held steady, barely flickering under the pressure. When the cruiser finally came within close range, Reyes gave a single, calm order. "Fire." A single, focused beam of energy shot from the human flagship, striking the Kaldor cruiser directly at its power core. The massive ship shuddered violently, its engines flickering and then dying completely, leaving it drifting helplessly in space, completely disabled but not destroyed. Throughout the battle, this pattern repeated itself again and again. Kaldor ships attacked with everything they had, and human ships responded with careful, controlled precision, disabling rather than destroying wherever possible. It was not because humanity lacked the power to destroy the entire fleet. It was because they had chosen not to. On the Skytorn's bridge, Krath watched in growing disbelief as ship after ship of his once mighty fleet was systematically disabled, engines cut, weapons silenced, shields collapsed, yet crews left alive, ships left intact. This was not how war was supposed to work. Enemies destroyed each other. They did not carefully spare one another in the middle of battle. And yet that was exactly what was happening. "Commander," Sira said, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and confusion, "we are losing this battle badly. Should we retreat?" Krath stared at the chaos surrounding his ship, watching as more and more Kaldor vessels went dark across the battlefield, disabled but strangely deliberately still alive. He thought back to Dr. Reyes's message, the calm, steady voice that had spoken of patience rather than fear, preparation rather than weakness. "They are not trying to destroy us," Krath realized slowly. "They are trying to prove a point." A sudden, powerful impact rocked the Skytorn violently, throwing crew members from their stations. Warning lights flashed red across every console. "Direct hit to our main engine core," an officer shouted over the chaos. Power levels dropping rapidly. Krath grabbed the edge of his control station to steady himself as the ship shook again. Around him, sparks flew from damaged panels, and smoke began filling parts of the bridge. "Status of the fleet?" Krath demanded. "Over half our ships are disabled, Commander," Sira reported, her voice tight with tension. "The rest are scattered, disorganized. We are losing badly." Krath closed his eyes for a brief moment, absorbing the full weight of what was happening. In 30 years of warfare, he had never faced a defeat like this. So swift, so complete, and so carefully, deliberately controlled by the enemy. He opened his eyes and made his decision. "All remaining ships," Krath said, his voice heavy but steady. "Ceasefire immediately." Sira turned toward him sharply. "Commander?" "We have lost this battle, Sira," Krath said quietly. "There is no honor in continuing to fight a battle already decided. Order all ships to stand down. Slowly, across the battlefield, the sound of weapons fire began to fade. Kaldor ships, badly damaged or completely disabled, drifted silently in space, their crews watching in stunned disbelief as the human fleet held its position, weapons still ready, but no longer firing. On the human flagship, Reyes watched the Kaldor fleet finally go silent, their attack completely stopped. "They're standing down, Commander," her officer reported. Reyes nodded slowly. "Hold position. Do not pursue. Open a direct channel to their flagship." A moment later, Krath's voice came through, tired, heavy, but steady, translated smoothly into human language. "This is Commander Krath of the Kaldor fleet," he said. "We surrender this engagement. You have proven your point." Reyes stood quietly for a moment before responding, her expression calm, without anger, without triumph, simply steady and clear. "Commander Krath," she said, "you came here believing you would find a weak, dying species hiding out of fear. Instead, you found a species that spent 20 years quietly preparing for exactly this moment. We did not fight this battle to destroy you. We fought it to be understood." There was a long pause before Krath responded. "You could have destroyed my entire fleet," he said slowly. "Why show restraint? Because destruction was never our goal," Reyes replied simply. "Respect was. A species capable of patience, discipline, and controlled strength does not need to prove itself through needless destruction. We wanted the galaxy to understand, clearly and completely, exactly what humanity has become." On the Skytorn's bridge, Krath listened carefully, feeling something shift deep within him, an old warrior's instinct recognizing true strength when he finally saw it clearly. "You fought with discipline I have rarely seen, even among the strongest warrior species in this galaxy," Krath admitted. 20 years of silence was not weakness. I understand that now. It was patience I underestimated greatly. "Many species will make the same mistake you did," Reyes said. "Humanity's silence has always been misunderstood. We hope after today that mistake will not be repeated so easily." Krath nodded slowly, even though Reyes could not see him. "You have my word, Commander Reyes. The Kaldor will carry this message back to our people, and to any who ask about the quiet, dangerous species called humanity." Sira, standing quietly beside Krath, finally spoke, her voice softer now than it had been throughout the entire battle. "Commander, what happens now?" Krath looked out at the battlefield, filled with disabled ships, quiet and still, surrounded by the calm, controlled strength of the human fleet. "Now," Krath said slowly, "we return home, carrying a very different story than the one we expected to tell." As the battered Kaldor fleet began its slow retreat, engines struggling, crews exhausted, Krath took one final look at the small blue and green planet they had once believed to be weak and defenseless. He understood now that this was only the beginning. Humanity's silence had ended not through fear, not through weakness, but through calm, deliberate choice. The galaxy, wide and dangerous, filled with powerful empires and ancient rivalries, had just learned something important, something that would soon spread far beyond this single, quiet battlefield. Humanity was no longer hiding, and humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. Back on the human flagship, Reyes watched the retreating Kaldor fleet with quiet satisfaction. Not the satisfaction of victory in battle, but the deeper satisfaction of 20 years of sacrifice finally proving worthwhile. Her chief engineer approached quietly. "Commander, word of this battle will spread quickly across the galaxy. Other species will hear what happened here today." Reyes nodded slowly. "Good. Let them hear it." "Are you worried about what comes next?" the engineer asked. Reyes allowed herself a small, calm smile, the first real smile since the battle had begun. "We spent 20 years preparing for exactly this moment," she said quietly. "Whatever comes next, we will be ready for that too." She turned to look out at the stars silent and endless beyond the ship's window, and spoke one final, quiet thought, more to herself than to anyone else. The Deathworlders came looking for a weak, silent species. Instead, they found a species that had been patient enough to wait 20 years for exactly this moment. 3 days after the battle near Earth's moon, a small, damaged Kaldor ship limped its way back into Kaldor territory. It carried Commander Kraith Sira and the surviving crew of the Skytorn, along with something far more important than any of them, the story of what had truly happened at Earth. News traveled fast in the galaxy, faster than any ship could fly, to the long journey home. The trip back to Kaldor space took nearly 2 weeks. For most of that journey, the ship was quiet, far quieter than any Kaldor vessel had ever been. Soldiers who had once laughed at Earth's warning message now sat silently in the hallways, replaying the battle in their minds again and again. Sira spent much of the journey standing beside Krath on the bridge, watching the stars pass slowly by. "I keep thinking about it," she admitted one night, when the bridge was nearly empty. "The way they fought. It wasn't rage. It wasn't desperation. It was calm, like they had already lived through this battle 1,000 times in training." Krath nodded slowly. That is exactly what it was. 20 years of preparation does that to a people. It removes fear from the moment of battle, because the moment has already been imagined, planned for, rehearsed. "Do you think they knew we were coming?" Sira asked. "Not just us specifically, but someone eventually?" "I believe," Krath said slowly. "They built that fleet not for us, but for anyone. They did not know who would come first. They simply knew someone eventually would." Sira was quiet for a long moment. "That is a frightening kind of patience." "It is," Krath agreed. "And it is also something I have come to respect deeply." One young soldier, a nervous recruit named Torin who had never seen real combat before the battle at Earth, approached Kraith privately during the journey home. He looked exhausted, his hands still slightly shaking from the memory of the fight. "Commander," Torin said quietly, "may I ask you something?" Kraith nodded. "Why did they let us live? Truly, we attacked them first. We came to their home with weapons ready. Any other empire would have destroyed us completely, made an example of us for the rest of the galaxy to see." Kraith considered the question carefully before answering. "Because destroying us would have proven nothing," he finally said. "Any species with enough weapons can destroy an enemy. That is not difficult. It takes no wisdom, no discipline, only power and cruelty. But choosing not to destroy an enemy, while still proving your strength completely, that takes something far rarer." "What is that?" Torin asked. "Confidence," Krath said. "True confidence. They did not need to destroy us to prove they were strong. They already knew they were strong. They only needed us to understand it too." Torin nodded slowly, though his young face still carried the weight of everything he had witnessed. "I will remember this day for the rest of my life." "As will we all," Krath said quietly. The Grand Council. At the Kaldor Grand Council, a massive circular chamber built from dark stone, dozens of high-ranking leaders gathered to hear Krath's report. Many of them had already heard rumors, twisted and exaggerated versions of the battle, but none of them had heard the full truth yet. Some rumors claimed the entire fleet had been destroyed. Others claimed Earth had used some kind of forbidden ancient weapon. A few wild stories even suggested the humans had made a secret alliance with a far more powerful empire. None of these stories were true, but fear and confusion had already begun spreading through Kaldor space before Krath even arrived. Krath stood before the council, tired but steady, his scarred hands resting calmly at his sides. "Tell us plainly, Commander," the head elder said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Did the humans destroy our fleet?" "No," Kraith answered simply. A murmur spread through the room. "They could have," Kraith continued. "They had the power to destroy every ship we sent. Instead, they disabled us, ship by ship, with precision I have never witnessed in 30 years of warfare. They spared our crews. They spared our lives. They did this not out of weakness, but out of complete and total control." The chamber fell silent. One older council member, a stern woman named Vessa, who had served on the council longer than anyone else present, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "You are asking us to believe," she said slowly, "that a species we once considered primitive managed to defeat an entire Kaldor battle fleet without destroying a single ship?" I'm not asking you to believe it, Krath replied evenly. I am telling you it happened. I stood on my own bridge and watched it happen with my own eyes. Fessa studied him carefully, searching his face for any sign of exaggeration or fear clouding his judgment. She found none. Only tired, honest respect. For 20 years we believed their silence meant fear, Krath said, turning to address the entire chamber now. We were wrong. Their silence meant patience. While we assumed they were dying quietly, they were building quietly. While we assumed they were weak, they were becoming something far stronger than most species in this galaxy will ever become. Another council member, a younger warrior named Halth, who had strongly supported the attack from the beginning, stood up angrily. Then we should return with a larger fleet, he said. If they surprised us once, we correct our mistake and strike again, properly prepared this time. Several council members murmured in agreement, old warrior instincts flaring at the idea of retreat without true victory. Krath raised a hand calmly. Halth, I understand the instinct. I felt it myself during the battle. But consider this carefully. Their fleet fought with complete control. They chose restraint, even while holding total advantage over us. That was not the full extent of their strength, that was merely enough strength to end the battle quickly and safely. The room grew quiet again. If we return with a larger fleet, Krath continued, we are not testing a weakness we discovered. We are testing the limits of a species that has already shown us they had far more held in reserve than they used. I do not believe that is a test any of us truly wish to take. Halth sat back down slowly, his anger fading into uncertain silence. The head elder leaned forward. And your recommendation, Commander? Krath did not hesitate. Leave them in peace. Do not test them again. A species capable of such discipline and restraint is not an enemy we wish to make. If they wanted war, truly wanted it, we would not have returned home today. The council remained silent for a long moment, weighing the commander's words carefully. Finally, the head elder spoke. Very well, Commander Krath. Your record and your judgment have earned you this council's trust. We will send no further fleets toward Earth. Instead, he paused thoughtfully. Perhaps it is time we consider a different approach entirely. What approach? Sira asked, standing quietly beside Krath. The head elder's eyes moved toward her. Diplomacy, General. A concept the Kaldor have rarely needed in our long history. Perhaps it is time we learned. Whispers across the stars. News of the battle spread quickly beyond Kaldor space, carried by traders, travelers, and curious scouts eager to share the strange story of a quiet planet that had shocked one of the galaxy's most feared warrior races. In a busy trading station near the edge of neutral space, merchants from a dozen different species gathered around a small viewing screen, watching a recorded message about the battle, passed from ship to ship like valuable cargo. A small insect-like trader named Shiv, from a peaceful merchant species known as the Ithrel, listened carefully to the story with wide, curious eyes. 20 years of silence, Shiv said softly to a companion beside him. And this entire time everyone assumed it meant death or fear. A dangerous assumption to make, his companion replied. Perhaps the most dangerous kind of enemy is the one who says nothing at all. Shiv nodded slowly. I wonder how many other empires are reconsidering their old assumptions about quiet, unknown worlds tonight. In a completely different part of the galaxy, aboard a massive warship belonging to a proud, ancient empire known as the Threxian Dominion, a tall, cold-eyed commander named Threxa listened to the same story with far less patience than the humble traders had shown. A single primitive planet embarrassed the Kaldor, Threxa said with obvious disbelief, addressing her advisors in a sharp, commanding voice. Impossible. The Kaldor commander must be covering up a far greater defeat, or perhaps a foolish trap he walked into blindly. Her chief advisor, a quieter, more cautious alien named Doss, hesitated before responding. The reports are consistent across multiple independent sources, Commander. Kaldor soldiers themselves confirm the story. It appears accurate. Threxa's eyes narrowed. She had ruled her fleet for over 50 years, conquering dozens of smaller civilizations along the way, and she did not enjoy hearing stories of any species successfully resisting a stronger empire, especially not one previously dismissed as primitive and weak. Then perhaps, she said slowly, a dangerous curiosity creeping into her voice. It is time the Threxian Dominion investigates this quiet little planet for ourselves. Doss's expression grew visibly uneasy. Commander, if I may suggest caution. Caution is for the weak, Doss. Threxa interrupted sharply. The Kaldor were foolish, arrogant, and unprepared. We are neither. Begin preparations for a scouting mission. Quiet, careful. Nothing like the clumsy approach the Kaldor used. I want to understand exactly what we are truly dealing with before deciding our next move, far away without any of them knowing it yet. A new, more dangerous chapter of humanity's story had just quietly begun. Life returns to Earth. Back on Earth, life inside the hidden human command center slowly began returning to a calmer rhythm. Ships returned to their hidden docking stations. Engineers began repairs on the few vessels that had taken minor damage. Soldiers rested for the first time in days. Commander Reyes stood alone in a quiet observation room, looking out at the stars through a wide window, Earth glowing softly behind her, calm and peaceful once again. The door opened quietly, and her chief engineer stepped inside. Commander, he said, reports are coming in from every direction. Word of the battle has already reached at least a dozen other species. Some are curious, some are cautious. A few, he paused, smiling slightly, have already sent quiet messages asking about possible peaceful contact. Reyes turned toward him, a small, tired smile crossing her face. So it begins. Are we ready for what comes next? The engineer asked. Contact with other species, alliances, maybe even more conflicts down the road? Reyes looked back out at the stars, thinking carefully before answering. 20 years ago we made a choice, she said. We chose silence not because we were afraid of the galaxy, but because we needed time to become ready for it. That time is over now. Whatever comes next, whether it's peace, alliance, or more conflict, we will not face it unprepared ever again. Later that evening, Reyes called a private meeting with her closest advisors, gathered around a simple wooden table inside a quiet underground room, far from the noise of the busy command center above them. We need to discuss what comes next, Reyes said, looking around at the small group. 20 years of silence is over. The galaxy knows about us now. We cannot control every rumor or every reaction, but we can control how we choose to respond. An older advisor named Dr. Elena Marsh, the very scientist whose words had started humanity's silence 20 years earlier, now much older but still sharp-minded, spoke first. We always knew this day would come, she said calmly. We prepared not just our fleet but our plans for exactly this moment. Controlled, honest communication, no exaggeration, no hidden threats, simply the truth about who we are and what we are capable of. And if other species react with aggression instead of curiosity? A younger officer asked nervously. Then we respond exactly as we did with the Kaldor, Reyes said firmly. With controlled strength, not cruelty. We are not interested in conquering anyone. We are only interested in surviving, and in being respected enough that no one mistakes our peace for weakness ever again. The first response. 2 weeks after the battle, the first official response arrived. Not from an aggressive empire seeking revenge, but from a small, peaceful alliance of trading species known as the Coalition, a loose group of smaller civilizations who had learned long ago that survival often depended on careful diplomacy rather than raw military strength. Their message was cautious but respectful, requesting a formal, peaceful meeting between representatives of Earth and the Coalition, the first official diplomatic contact humanity had received in over 20 years. Reyes read the message carefully, sitting quietly in her private office, weighing the decision. This is exactly the kind of opportunity we hoped for, Dr. Marsh said, standing beside her. A cautious, respectful approach from a group who values stability over conquest, and exactly the kind of first step that will show the rest of the galaxy how we intend to conduct ourselves, Reyes added thoughtfully, carefully, honestly, without fear. She approved the meeting, and for the first time in 20 years, A small human delegation prepared to leave Earth's solar system, not as scouts hiding in silence, but as official representatives of a species finally ready to step, carefully and deliberately, back into the wider galaxy. A quiet warning. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the Threxian scouting ship ordered by Commander Threxa moved silently toward Earth's solar system. Cloaked carefully, its crew under strict orders to observe only, gathering information without revealing their presence. The scout ship's captain, a careful, experienced officer named Vrask, studied Earth from a safe distance, reviewing every scrap of data his sensors could gather. Commander Threxa was expecting weakness, Vrask muttered to his second-in-command, staring at the same calm, steady defense fleet still positioned openly near Earth's moon, no longer hidden, now standing as a clear, confident display of strength. This does not look like weakness to me. Should we report back immediately? His second-in-command asked. Vrask considered the question carefully. Unlike Commander Threxa, he had not personally witnessed the Kaldor's humiliating defeat, but the sensor readings in front of him told their own clear story. Precise, powerful, disciplined defenses, calmly maintained without any sign of fear or aggression. Yes, Vrask finally said. Gather everything we can, quietly, carefully, and report back immediately. Commander Threxa needs to understand exactly what she is considering challenging. Before she makes a decision none of us can undo. The scout ship lingered a while longer, gathering data, before quietly slipping away into the darkness of space, carrying a warning that would soon reach yet another powerful empire, watching Earth from a careful distance. Earth's new voice. Weeks later, a new signal left Earth's solar system for the first time in 20 years, calm, clear, and confident, broadcast openly across known space for any species willing to listen. It was not a threat. It was not a warning. It was simply an introduction, spoken by Commander Reyes herself, her voice steady and calm, carrying the same quiet strength that had defined humanity's long silence. To the species of this galaxy, humanity has returned to speak. For 20 years we chose silence, not from fear, but from necessity. We have used that time wisely. We come now neither as conquerors nor as victims, but as equals, ready to build relationships built on respect, not assumption. Approach us in peace, and you will find patient allies. Approach us in aggression, and you will find exactly what the Kaldor fleet found. The choice, as always, belongs to you. The message spread quickly across the stars, reaching empire after empire, species after species, each one hearing, for the first time in 2 decades, the true voice of a planet once dismissed as weak, silent, and forgotten. The final reflection. That night, Commander Reyes stood once more in her quiet observation room, watching Earth turn slowly below her, its cities glowing softly, calm and peaceful, protected now not by silence, but by strength earned through 20 patient years. Dr. Marsh joined her quietly, standing beside the window. "Do you think we made the right choice all those years ago?" Marsh asked softly. "Choosing silence instead of trying to fight for recognition immediately?" Reyes thought carefully before answering, her eyes still fixed on the peaceful planet below. "I think," she said slowly, "that the galaxy is full of species who mistake loudness for strength and silence for fear. We proved today that the opposite can be true. Sometimes the quietest people in the room are simply the ones who are busy building something the rest of the world isn't ready to see yet." Marsh smiled softly. "The Deathworlders came looking for a weak, silent species." Reyes finished the thought quietly, her voice calm and steady, carrying 2 decades of patience within it. Instead, they found a species that had been patient enough to wait 20 years for exactly this moment, and strong enough to make sure it would never be underestimated again. Outside the window, Earth continued its slow, peaceful turn, no longer hidden, no longer silent, no longer misunderstood, ready now, at last, to take its place among the stars. The end.